Madam Clerk.
Oral questions by members.
Member for Surrey Cloverdale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The mass murder of festival attendees in Vancouver over the weekend has had a profound impact on our province. But, Mr. Speaker, this is not the first time there have been serious injuries or deaths involving people with severe mental illness in our province. We heard multiple examples yesterday, and frankly, for years, of severely mentally ill people failed by this government who go on to cause harm, deaths, or who themselves become victims of violence. Mr. Speaker, we need an immediate public inquiry. If the Premier is concerned about tainting the future trial related to this weekend's tragedy, the inquiry could focus on all those other incidents. As a province, we cannot wait. My question to the Premier is, will the Premier do the right thing and announce a public inquiry into mental health care in BC today?
Mr. Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. There are a number of pieces in the member's question I want to address. First of all, with respect to the incident at the Lapu Lapu Day Festival, the mass murder, it was just that. It was a mass murder by a man who decided to drive his vehicle through a crowd. Now, we don't know why yet. That'll be tested at the criminal trial and ultimately perhaps at a public inquiry. But we will get British Columbians those answers. Vancouver Coastal Health tells us he was under active treatment. They tell us he was compliant with his medication. They tell us that there was no indication that he was violent. That will all be tested by cross-examination, perhaps twice. And so, Honourable Speaker, I'll ask the member and others to reserve judgment about what happened and let that process play out. For mental health broadly in the province, do we really need an inquiry to tell us what we know we need to do, which is open more beds, provide more care, provide more interventions in communities? Because that's what we're doing. 140 more hospital beds across the province. We're opening across the province intensive and voluntary care beds for people struggling with mental health, addiction, and brain injury. Interventions in communities, additional ACT teams, working with experts in the field like Dr. Daniel Vigo. There's an aspect of the member's question that I do want to address, the Mental Health Act itself. We announced today that we'll do a review and modernization of the Act to ensure it meets the expectations of British Columbians. We've held off on that because of a court challenge to the Act and the forced treatment provisions. We're defending the Act. We think we need those forced treatment provisions. But the moment we're in, we can't wait. We need to act.
Member supplemental.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Premier stood on the steps of this place and said that if he didn't get the answers from court, he would call a public inquiry. Now he stands in this place and says, why do a public inquiry if we already know what to do? Well, if the Premier knows what to do, why is he not doing it, Mr. Speaker? Yesterday I received an email from the parents of a young man who had mental illness. He was under the care of a mental health team, and he had been deteriorating for 2 months before he was murdered, stabbed to death in an altercation. His parents believe a lack of services and his deterioration contributed to the circumstances that led to his murder. His parents said the mental health team did not check in on their son with proper frequency, effectiveness, or verify his medication. They said, quote, "No one listened to us. Our son was miserably failed. His death could have been prevented." End quote. Will the Premier do the right thing by this family and countless other families? Families that are impacted by the failures of the mental health system under this Premier and this government, and call an inquiry into our system today.
Premier.
I'm sure the member didn't do it intentionally, Honourable Speaker, but she conflated my answer. On the issue of the mass murder at the Lapu Lapu Festival, British Columbians deserve answers. Why did this happen? If they don't get the answers from the criminal process, we will call a full public inquiry. Very clear about that in my first answer. Clear again now. We will get British Columbians the answers because I want the answers. British Columbians want the answers. I know the member wants the answers too. But in terms of the broad array of issues, in terms of people struggling in our streets, in our communities, in terms of people needing additional supports, attending at hospitals, and it's not just mental health, it's other aspects of healthcare too. why we're expanding hospitals, why we're expanding beds across the province, why we're expanding assertive care teams. We know what to do there. Now, the member has raised a very important issue today again, and in her private member's bill, about the role of families. How can families be more involved in the care, in particular of adult children that are struggling with mental health and addiction? This is exactly the kind of issue that a review and modernization of the Mental Health Act can address, and we're doing that work.
Member for Richmond Queensborough.
Yesterday, during question period, the Premier commented about this past weekend's horrific tragedy and on the suspect. Quote, "He is rightly charged with murder. He is facing a criminal trial. I hope he is convicted. I hope he spends the rest of his life behind bars." Unquote. Yesterday, at a press conference and in the House, the Premier said that he didn't want to comment on the case because he didn't want to interfere in the police investigation. To the Attorney General, can she please confirm whether or not the Premier's comments yesterday meet the definition of interference in a police investigation?
Premier.
Honourable Speaker, the member is again doing what the first member did, and I'm sure unintentionally. He is conflating my very specific remarks about a public inquiry where we call people to testify, force them to testify about the incidents at the Lapu Lapu Festival. That could compromise the criminal investigation into that mass murder. We won't do that. My own opinion is that this man should be tried, should be prosecuted, should be sentenced for the rest of his life to prison for murdering children and seniors and others. That's my opinion, and I'll be blunt. I think that's the opinion of British Columbians across the province. But it's up to the criminal courts, Honourable Speaker.
Members.
It's up to the courts, Honourable Speaker. They will do that work, and we'll let them do that work.
Member supplemental.
With all due respect, I did not refer to a public inquiry. I'll read the quote again. Quote, "He is rightly charged with murder. He is facing a criminal trial. I hope he is convicted. I hope he spends the rest of his life behind bars." Unquote. While we hold strong opinions to what we want to happen to the perpetrator, we don't want to interfere in a police investigation. To the Attorney General, does she agree that the head of this government publicly declaring his own preference regarding guilt, innocence, and sentencing before a police investigation is complete constitutes interference?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I don't know what to take from this. You know, one member is completely willing to try and convict the care team that was following this individual.
Members.
To
Let the
speculate
Premier
about
finish.
what happened until the information is in. Now, I raised
Members.
this yesterday. I think it's
Please.
critical that the facts have a chance to come out. The one person that it is unambiguous about what they did, the individual who drove a vehicle into a crowd of British Columbians, the opposition can't bring itself to say that is murder. He should be tried and convicted. Well, I'm sorry. That's my opinion. And if the member wants me to apologize for that, I never will.
Leader of the third party. Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The 2024 Climate Change Accountability Report was released yesterday. I'll start by saying I'm grateful for the transparency. And this caucus and many British Columbians are frustrated that we are not on track to meet our climate targets. It's my job to convey the anguish and anxiety felt by my constituents on this. A failure to meet legislated targets in any other area would bring harsh criticism, and this is no different. Climate inaction means British Columbians will pay a much steeper price than any carbon price can inflict. Infrastructure damage, health consequences, societal insecurity. This work is going to be hard, Mr. Speaker, and I sadly acknowledge we're in a lull on prioritizing this existential issue of our time. It's difficult to lead the way when popular sentiment works against our long-term responsibilities. My question is for the Minister of Energy and Climate Solutions. How can this House and this government inspire British Columbians to see climate stabilization as a populist collective effort, and giving government of any stripe the support and authority to accelerate the energy transition we all know we need to make?
Minister of Energy.
Well, thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the Leader of the Green Party for the question. Honourable Speaker, just in this period since the election, we've announced 10 renewable energy projects and today introduced legislation to ensure and help ensure that those projects are built. We will be doing more on this question in the future. I think a singular and remarkable effort to respond to our economic development needs and our climate needs, to link them together and to build everywhere in British Columbia, and we're going to do it since the election, Honourable Speaker. We've introduced new regulation on methane, where we're leading Canada, indeed leading the world. A 43% reduction in methane emissions in the oil and gas sector, and the industry deserves some credit for this as well, Honourable Speaker, I would say. And we are going to meet our targets for 2030. Do we have more work to do? You bet we have more work to do. That's why we're reviewing Clean BC programs to ensure that we work towards reducing emissions in British Columbia. That we do that, we make it a priority, and we do it linked to the affordability of people in our province and linked to the clean economic growth we need to do to create jobs everywhere in BC.
Member supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the areas where we have a lot of work to do is emissions from transportation, which are up 18% since 2007. This figure is bound to go up with the repeal of the consumer carbon price. The underlying reason is no mystery. In my riding, there's no public transit between Whistler and Vancouver, despite it being a key commuter and tourist corridor. Commuters across BC spend too much of their days stuck in traffic for hours because public transit is inadequate or non-existent. I appreciate the effort on wind energy, but our concern is that this government is ramping up clean energy that fossil fuel export enterprises can use to greenwash their dirty operations. Every dollar of subsidy to polluting industries is a dollar not spent building public transit and a low-carbon economy that benefits British Columbians in the long term and has a higher return on investment for these public dollars. What is the minister's plan to reduce emissions in the transportation sector?
Minister.
Well, thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I just disagree with the characterization of the member, and this is a good debate to have. When you produce clean energy and then you do it again and again and again, you build out on the extraordinary opportunity for clean energy on projects, by the way, that are 51% owned by First Nations. You are making a transformational decision about the economy, and we have to continue to do that, Honourable Speaker. There is no other option to do that, and it benefits our economy, creates jobs, and builds public support for action against climate change. You bet we support this. And I hope all members of the House will support this, and we'll be testing that in a coming debate in the legislature, Honourable Speaker. With respect to transportation initiatives, BC has the lead in Canada in transition to EVs, Honourable Speaker. And that's because of the work of a lot of people, including new car dealers, including environmental leaders, and we got to continue to drive in that direction. We have some of the most significant transit projects being built in Canada right now under the leadership of my colleague, the Minister of Transportation. We need more transit. You bet we're building more transit. We need new EVs on the road. We're building it. It means the electricity we make in BC replaces the gasoline we import to BC. This is good for our province. We support Clean BC, and we're going to continue to act on climate change.
Member Courtney Comox.
Both sides of this House agree that mental health is in crisis in this province. Last week, this government proudly announced 9 involuntary care beds at Surrey pretrial and triumphantly declared that progress. Let's be clear, 9 beds isn't progress. It's a Band-Aid. Even Dr. Daniel Vigo said, quote, "Prior to the beds opening, people who required involuntary care while in jail had to wait in segregation for weeks," end quote. Weeks in solitary confinement while in mental health distress. That's not care. That's cruelty. Can the minister confirm that people elsewhere in this province are not being held in solitary confinement awaiting mental health care?
Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. Thank you to the member for the question, talking about the very important interventions and action that this government is taking to support people who need a very special kind of care. Mr. Speaker, we have Dr. Vigo working with us as a Chief Scientific Advisor. His work has helped us to identify a very small group of people who suffer from concurrent disorders, substance use, complex mental health challenges, often acquired brain injury, who need these supports. Mr. Speaker, it is so important that whether this person is in a correctional facility or outside, that they get it. And that's why we've made the commitment that we have. That's why we're building and have opened 10 beds, Mr. Speaker, at the Surrey Pretrial Centre. That's why next month, approved homes at Alouette and Maple Ridge will open for people outside of the correctional centre. That's why we've made the commitment to continue to build out this system so that people, rather than being held in solitary confinement, get the care that they need before they can be released back into the correctional facility population, or if being released or out in the community, get the support that they need. Mr. Speaker, we know that more needs to be done. We've made the commitment, we're acting, we've opened beds, and we're going to do more.
Member supplemental.
Respectfully, Minister, I don't believe it's a small number. That is not the experience in communities across British Columbia. To the Minister, how many people are concurrently being held in segregation while awaiting involuntary care? And when will this minister commit to funding enough beds across the province to make this cruel practice obsolete?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. One of the most important things I think that we are all seeing is how we have to approach this work with compassion and with dignity and with ensuring that people are safe in our communities and that people who are experiencing these disorders are safe as well. Mr. Speaker, for too long, there has been a cycle of moving between the criminal justice system and out into community, Mr. Speaker, with people not getting the care that they need. The humane thing to do, the right thing to do, is to provide supports for these people, and that's what we're doing through involuntary treatment. Mr. Speaker, that's why we opened these 10 beds at Surrey Pretrial. We're going to continue this work. We, as a government, have recognized how important that is to do. That's why we have Dr. Vigo working with us. We're going to continue to do that. And as I said, Mr. Speaker, we're going to expand this system of care so that people get the compassionate, patient-centered care that they need.
Member for Kelowna Mission.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we can definitely all agree that it's been too long. For years, municipalities and community groups in the Okanagan have been forced to pick up the slack and take the blame for this government's failed addiction and mental health policies. There is a regional consensus around the need for a facility like the Redfish Healing Centre, which is a proven model to provide mandatory compassionate care for people in need. But people in desperate need of help are still waiting, and our communities are still bearing the brunt of it. Will the Premier commit today to fast-track this project?
Minister of Health.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Thank you to the member for the question. The Redfish Healing Centre has presented an opportunity to give people the compassionate care that they need under the very specialized guidance of teams of mental health professionals, of psychiatrists, of people who work with them to help recover from severe substance use addictions combined with mental health challenges. Mr. Speaker, I've had the opportunity to visit the facility and see the incredible care that's being delivered there. Mr. Speaker, we've made that commitment to continue to expand those services and more to ensure that people get the care they need, not just that type of specialized care, but all through the continuum of care that is needed, from early intervention, Mr. Speaker, right through to the kinds of treatment and recovery services that are needed, the aftercare, so that people can return to their homes and return to their communities. Mr. Speaker, we are not shying away from this. We never will. We're going to continue, and we're going to continue to work hard at it.
Member for Skeena.
Mr. Speaker, Northern BC has the highest rates of suicide in the province, nearly double the national average and significantly more than any other health authority in British Columbia. Families are losing loved ones because basic mental health care simply doesn't exist in Northern BC. In my riding, a psychiatrist only comes a few times a year, and it's a long wait to see a counsellor. Will the health minister commit to at least one full-time psychiatrist in Skeena by the end of 2025?
Minister of Health.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. And I appreciate the many opportunities that she and I have had to discuss the inequity of services for people who are living in the north and the need to expand those services to rural and remote communities. And I couldn't agree more. Mr. Speaker, we know that it's very difficult for people to navigate the mental health system, and that people who live in the north and live in smaller communities experience that to a greater degree. And that's why action is needed, and I completely agree. It's why we've been expanding crisis teams across BC. It's why we've established telephone lines for people to be able to get access. Mr. Speaker, it's why we have invested in crisis counseling and counseling supports, low barrier counseling. In fact, Mr. Speaker, last year over 29,000 people accessed our programs in counseling. Over half of them were accessing mental health supports for the very first time. We are going to continue to invest in the mental health care system, and we are going to continue to expand access to those supports, including in the member's own writing. Thank you.
Member supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll take that response as a no then. We still don't get access to a psychiatrist in Skeena. Clearly, this government doesn't grasp the gravity of the situation in BC's north. Mental health challenges are the precursor to many of the problems that are devastating our communities, particularly addiction. Thousands of British Columbians have been seeking treatment voluntarily, and they cannot access it. It's enough excuses, so I'm hoping if the Minister of Environment, the only NDP MLA in the north, can talk to her colleagues down south and finally get some action for the people that are in need in northern BC.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. I welcome a conversation with any MLA from any riding to talk about the supports in their communities. Mr. Speaker, the member talks about the importance of being able to gain access to mental health supports early, and I want to talk specifically about one particular program that this government has established and invested in, and that's the Early Psychosis Intervention Program. Mr. Speaker, this is so important for youth to be able to access, and I'm going to tell a story about a young man, Cameron Webster. Cameron Webster was a typical teenager. He was into sports. He was a competitive boxer. When he was 19 years old, he began to experience auditory hallucinations and paranoia. His parents took him to the hospital. He was diagnosed with psychosis. He became a client of Island Health's Early Psychosis Intervention Program. And a year later, he was also diagnosed with a schizoaffective disorder, Mr. Speaker. He says that the time he experienced in psychosis, with psychosis, marked the hardest part of his life, but it gave him a new direction in life and compassion for others. And now, today, he went on to study mental health and addictions locally at Camosun College. He works as a peer support worker in the same program that he used to attend. Mr. Speaker, that is a guiding light in the kinds of supports we need to continue to expand for youth, for teenagers, for adults, and it's the work that this government is so deeply committed to doing. Mr. Speaker, we are going to continue to do this work because we know that people need the care when they need it, where they need it, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
Member for Prince George Mackenzie.
Mr. Speaker, we've just heard from the Minister of Health, but respectfully, my colleague is not from Vancouver Island. Yesterday, the Premier told this House that the government is making very good progress on psychiatric care in northern BC. Yet today, patients in crisis continue to be released prematurely, directly risking community safety and safety to themselves. The only secure forensic care for a potentially dangerous patient in a community like Terrace is 12 hours away in Kamloops, if there's a space even available. The Premier talks about meetings and special advisors, but Northern Health needs more than promises. They need secure psychiatric care beds immediately. The City of Prince George supports the petition for better psychiatric care in Northern Health, and I'll ask the Premier again while the City of Prince George delegation is here in this House today. Mr. Speaker, when will the government move beyond meetings and platitudes and actually deliver secure psychiatric hospital beds that northern communities desperately deserve?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I thank the member for his advocacy for his community. I suspect he's aware that our work there goes well beyond meetings and conversations. I look forward to being able to update him very soon. We've been working closely with the City of Prince George, with Chief Dolly and Logan, with mental health specialists, the local hospital, on adding additional beds, and I look forward to share more information soon.
Member for Langley Abbotsford.
Mr. Speaker, this government talks about action, but every day things in this province just get worse. Yesterday, a constituent of mine sent me a video of a drug tent that is set up once again outside of Langley Memorial Hospital. This tent was set up 50 yards away from long-term care home for seniors. I asked the minister in February to take care of this, and she said, quote, "We expect health authorities whose jurisdiction it is to enforce this policy, to do that work," unquote. She promised me it would be dealt with. Here we are over 2 months later, and this problem still persists. Mr. Speaker, when will this minister act and get rid of the drug tent outside of Langley Memorial Hospital where families go to visit their loved ones?
Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The member refers to Surrey Memorial Hospital, a place that has episodic... The member mentioned Surrey and mentioned Langley. I'll talk about Langley. Mr. Speaker, overdose prevention services are an important part of the continuum of supports that are provided to people that help separate them from the toxic drug supply and keep them alive and give them access to people to talk about the supports that they need. Mr. Speaker, I've spoken in this House many times before around the work that we're doing on overdose prevention services and ensuring that we are working with health authorities under the policies that are provided, but also updating that guidance and policies for health authorities to ensure that people are kept safe. Mr. Speaker, that staff and workers, volunteers at these services, the people around in communities as well, and I'll have more to say about that soon. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Surrey White Rock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Premier yesterday, he's talked about getting answers. The problem with that is that British Columbians have been looking for answers for years, not just since the tragic events that took place on Saturday. It's been years. We've seen Constable Yang lose her life. We've seen in White Rock somebody stabbed to death on the White Rock Promenade. We've seen an elderly senior have their door kicked in at midnight and beaten half to death, and then hours later, we see an RCMP officer almost have their firearm taken from them and had to have a physician choke that individual out. These cases aren't new to this House. The problem is the answers the Premier has been giving in this House aren't new either. The only legislation that we've got to deal with any of these issues has come from this side of the House. This side of the House has put that forward. We've had a Premier and a government campaign not one election, but 2 elections in terms of involuntary care and involuntary treatment, and nothing. My question to the Premier is this: will he stand up today and take responsibility for the utter failure that we are seeing in every corner of this province regarding mental health and regarding keeping our communities safe? Will the Premier take the leadership and the responsibility that he has failed us to get this done?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I appreciate the member's passion about the issue. It's important to have safe communities, but it's important to be accurate as well. The government has put in place new directives for physicians and nurses across the province about involuntary care for people struggling with mental health and addiction. We have now expanded ACT teams. We've expanded ACT teams across the province. These are teams that go out and assertively provide mental health care in the community, 34 across the province. in communities right across British Columbia. We have new crisis response teams. There are nurse and peers that go out to take the load off police, respond to mental health issues, provide care to people so police can focus on fighting crime. We're building 140 additional mental health beds at hospitals. We opened 10 new beds just the other day, Surrey pretrial, the beginning of a series of beds targeted at people struggling with mental health, addiction, and brain injury. Honourable Speaker, members asking serious questions. I'm providing serious answers about the action the government's taking. And we're not done. We've got more to do. The good news is that we're seeing crime rates come down in the province. Honourable Speaker.
Members, question was asked. Let's hear the answer. There's no need to interrupt. Please. Premier will continue.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. We know we've got more to do, but we also know that these interventions are working. And we're going to keep working until every single British Columbian is safe in every community in this province.
The bell ends the question period.